Okay, I will call the meeting to order. Ms. Gamero, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Monette?
Here.
Commissioner Pont?
Here.
Vice Chair Knudsen?
Present.
Chair Hardy?
Here. That brings us to the public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the Commission on items that are not on our agenda. Because of the restrictions imposed by the Brown Act, we cannot engage in any substantive discussion of matters not on the agenda, but any member of the public is welcome to speak at this time. Is there anyone who has an item for the public forum? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent items. Members of the Commission or the public may have any item on the consent agenda removed for discussion. I would like to pull item 4.2. Are there any other members of the Commission with an item to pull? Are there any members of the public who would like to request discussion of something on consent agenda? So I pulled item 4.2 because I have a conflict and cannot vote. Probably the simplest thing is for the rest of the Commission to take that up separately and then move on to the rest of the consent agenda.
So we make a motion to accept item 4.2. Item 4.2.
Second.
Say roll call.
Sorry. I am now the acting chair. Ms. Gamero, could we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Commissioner Pont?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Knudsen?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take over again. That leaves the rest of the consent items. Is there a motion to approve items 4.1 and 4.3? 4.1 is approval of minutes from September 4th, and 4.3 is a request for a design review exemption to perform minor exterior modifications to the existing residence located at 1513 Madrona. I will entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Gamero?
Commissioner Pont?
Yes.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Vice Chair Knudsen?
Yes.
Chair Hardy?
Yes. That brings us to the items on the public hearing section of the agenda. Item 5.1 has been continued from September 4th and is now being continued to a date uncertain. Is any action by the Commission required then, or none?
The item will be re-noticed for the specific public hearing upon which it will be heard.
Very good. Then we have item 5.2. This item also was continued, although from the August 21st hearing. This is a request by Gary Head for design review approval to construct a new single-family residence with detached accessory dwelling, landscaping, pool under separate permit, and other appurtenant improvements at 1760 Dean York Lane in St. Helena. Ms. Bianco, would you present the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hardy. The project before you is, as Chair Hardy said, a request for design review approval to construct a new single-family residence, accessory dwelling, landscaping, a pool, which is under a separate permit, and other improvements, including a covered dining area and covered porch. The property is currently a vacant residential lot of 0.692 acres. It's zoned low-density residential 1 acre minimum. By virtue of its access, which is provided via a private easement off of Dean York Lane, it's considered a legal non-conforming lot. The total proposed enclosed square footage would be approximately 4,700 square feet. As proposed, the buildings would exhibit a traditional form and style with some agricultural influence. Materials would consist of painted vertical wood siding, corrugated metal roofing, and black painted metal doors and windows. Total landscape area of about 15,000 square feet is proposed and would consist of lawn and water-efficient landscape plantings. Other landscape elements would include an outdoor kitchen and patio area, a covered shade patio, a pool, and a spa. The property would be enclosed by a 5-foot galvanized metal fence with a small portion of wood fence at the property rear. And the new construction would necessitate the removal of 1 fir tree and 2 redwoods, which I believe are at the front of the property. Consistent with low-density residential land use, the property was found to meet general plan policies. It was previously developed prior to 2012 and exhibits ready access to utilities and services, thereby avoiding putting pressure on areas outside of the urban limit line. The design gives a nod to traditional building forms in St. Helena, and the siting and configuration of the lot is functional and appropriate in the context of the greater neighborhood. While you'll see on the plans, the attached garage is located at the property front. Given the location of the property, it has no visual impact to the public street and remains sufficiently unobtrusive given its orientation to the side and the generous landscaping in front of it. For those reasons, staff found that overall the project meets relevant general plan policies. Similarly, the project was found by staff to meet the LR1A zoning requirements. The property meets or exceeds the prescribed setbacks and remains within all height limits. The main residence and attached garage would exhibit a height of 24 feet, and the accessory dwelling unit would measure 19 feet in height, with the outdoor dining trellis being about 11 feet 6 inches in height. The proposed FAR with exemptions would amount to 0.136, which is within the allowable 0.180. Per the LR1A development standards, development at the facade of the building or the front elevation of the building should not exceed 60% of the width of the lot. The attached garage is the forwardmost portion of the building and is approximately 16% of the lot. 16% of the lot width, with the remaining mass of the house set back approximately 50 feet from the garage front. Given the L-shaped configuration of the dwelling, staff feels that it reasonably meets the standard and all other applicable development standards as detailed in the staff report. As for the non-conforming lot status, per the zoning code, 1 single-family dwelling and customary accessory buildings may be permitted on any non-conforming lot in which a single-family residence is permitted. Therefore, the fact that the lot is a legal non-conforming lot by means of access doesn't preclude it from being developed with a residential use as proposed under this project. In addition, conditions of approval will ensure that the access drive, specifically the bridge component, would continue to provide safe and convenient access to the lot. The project is further able to meet the design review criteria in that it will feature a traditionally inspired design. The siding and the configuration of the lot is generally consistent with that in the neighborhood, and there's generous landscaping proposed around the property frontage. The design gives a nod to traditional agricultural building forms and exhibits detailing that's reflective of St. Helena's established character. The proposed uses, including the residence and the accessory dwelling unit, are housed in quasi-distinct structures, which reduces the massing while also maintaining the site functionality. And then, to the extent possible, natural features will be integrated into the site design. Finally, the project was found to meet water neutrality requirements as the baseline assumes 1,447 gallons per day, and the anticipated water use amounts to about 912 gallons per day. Also, staff is aware that the water neutrality has some site plans in it that vary somewhat from the project plans before you, and this has no bearing on the design review approval. It's just some slight differences. For these reasons and others discussed in the staff report, staff finds the project reasonably meets all design criteria and recommends that the Planning Commission determine that the project is exempt from the requirements of SEQA and accept the required findings and grant design review approval for the Cypress House at 1760 Dean York Lane. And that's all I have.
There we go. It's our practice to ask the applicant to present and then to follow up with questions of staff. So would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to make a presentation? Please come forward and state your name for the record.
Thank you. Is it on? Thank you, Commission. My name is Shay Zach. I'm the architect on the project and the owner of the project along with my wife, Mary Moore. And Lily, thank you for that. It was very well done, better than I could say it myself. We think of it as sort of a Turnbull-esque kind of a project, very simple forms, detailed nicely, beautiful materials. Also a low-key house, one story, slab on grade, very much receding from the street, very private house with ample setbacks. So I just wanted to say, again, thank you, Lily. And we are very excited about the project and hope we can move forward today. Any questions?
Do any members of the commission have questions for Mr. Zach?
Well, I have a question, but I'm not sure. I don't think you know the answer. But I was wondering how big the house that preceded your house was. Do you have any idea?
I don't recall. We have the plans, and they were approved by the commission. I think it was a slightly bigger house.
Really?
Let's see. Greg, do you remember about that? I think it was a two-story. It had some two-story components to it also.
Thank you.
So it was a larger house. We were trying to we sold a house in town, and we're attempting to downsize. So that was in our intent here. So hope it comes across. But we have a big family, lots of visitors for the weekends.
David, do you have any questions?
I have questions for staff, but not for the applicant. Thank you.
John?
Questions for staff, not necessarily for the applicant.
Very good. I do have a question.
Sure.
I see 3 significant trees proposed for removal, 2 redwoods and a fir.
They're actually almost dead trees. They're not very nice looking, and they're skinny, and they're scraggly. And even our landscape architect, Andy Cochran, who we do a lot of work with, agreed that those should come out. It's not that important to me. If somebody decides that they want to keep them in, we could work with that. There's really only one significant tree on the property, and that's this big giant cypress tree that you can see in the elevations. So we designed the house as a courtyard house, where the internal courtyard where the pool is defined by the main house and the guest house and a trellis in the back and this big, beautiful, giant cypress tree. I forget the diameter of it, but it's about 6 feet or something like that.
Are you planning to replace them, or you plant new trees, or?
Oh yeah, we have a significant new front planting along the front of the house.
With big trees.
Pardon me?
With big trees, or?
Yes, yeah, okay. Absolutely. Yeah, the planting, again, Andrea Cochran from San Francisco has done work with us, and she is very good at choosing fantastic trees and hedgerows and things like that.
Thank you.
Is that it?
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on then to questions for staff. John, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, my first one is a bit difficult. Is this a flag lot? And that circulates around a piece of code that we have that does allow easements across adjoining property to be considered the panhandle for a flag lot under some extremely peculiar, and I have no idea why they wrote them in, but peculiar conditions. It has to be a lot had to be existing before 1956 or legally created pursuant to the Subdivision Map Act and the subdivision ordinance of the city prior to April 11th, 1994. So does either of those conditions apply to this lot?
So staff did not find that this was a flag lot in our review. We did get input from the city attorney's office. Development of a flag lot would require a use permit. And the city attorney's office, in conjunction with our analysis of the code, referenced the fact that the previous project that was approved on the site did not require a use permit in order for it to be approved on that location. And so viewing this as a flag lot was determined to be a departure from past practice, in addition to the analysis in the code that staff conducted, which determined that it was not a flag lot.
Did that analysis include dating when the lots came into existence?
There is a parcel report in the packet, which I don't have in front of me, but it was more with regards to the existing nonconforming section of the code, which is the lens that staff looked at the project through.
So because it had been taken as existing nonconforming sometime in the past, before the 1993 general plan?
The analysis was based on a combination of factors. As mentioned, one, a project was previously approved on the site which did not view the site as a flag lot. Mm-hmm. The access to the parcel is not a traditional flag lot. The existing nonconforming sections of the code, which staff thought were more applicable to this parcel, which was existing. All those went into combination to support the determination that this is not a flag lot and does not require a use permit in order for it to be developed.
Okay, but nobody checked to see whether or not it did fit under this odd section.
I'm not prepared to answer that question here today. I don't want to say that no one checked, but I don't have details regarding the analysis specific to this project.
Okay, I mean, it looks like a flag lot. It's behind other lots. It doesn't have access to the roadway for the width of the lot. It's got essentially what looks like a panhandle, although badly shaped. Part of the point for me on flag lots is not only do they require a use permit, but there are certain safety regulations that go along with having a flag lot, particularly in terms of the access for emergency vehicles and the inspection of that access on an annual basis. So if the rest of the commissioners don't wish to consider this to be a flag lot and accept the answer that it's been treated not as one in the past, I would at the very least recommend that a condition be added to this such that the access is subject to inspection as if it was a flag lot. Because that's a health and safety issue. This one looks like a duck, talks like a duck, walks like a duck. It should be treated as if it's a duck. That's thing one. The second thing is, was there any changes made to the design after it was held over at the last meeting?
Yeah. So they originally had the garage attached to the house via a kind of a more basic trellis structure. Mm-hmm. And following the conversation, the current concerns that had come up from planning commissioners, they kind of more structurally integrated the connecting structure between the garage and the house, so that it became more structurally integrated than it had been.
Okay, so it went from basically a trellis to a breezeway.
Yeah. I guess that's a good way to explain it.
Okay. And that then obviates 1736-0606, right? The width
Yeah, so, I mean, from staff's standpoint, that code section references the front elevation of the house, and, by virtue of it being, an L-shaped, having that connectivity, that, under those circumstances, you would consider the garage pretty much to function as the front elevation.
So without the breezeway connection, as it was designed before, the house didn't meet the width requirement for the structure on the lot. And now that now that you've added a breezeway between the house and the garage, the basic belief is that it is now a single structure.
Yeah.
And therefore, the front of the structure is the front of the garage, or the side of the garage. And since it's more than 20 feet from the side of the garage to the front of the main structure, the width at the front of the structure is only the width of the garage for 1736060A6, right?
Yeah, to meet the intent of that, yes. And I mean, if you have an attached garage, it's one, unit.
Right.
And so, so I think for the purposes of that, staff understood that, if it were to be structurally integrated and be function as one unit, then it would be able to meet that. If you had a detached garage, not so much.
Okay, so it was a clever addition. Let's leave it at that.
An adaptation. An adaptation to the requirement.
Okay. I would suggest that at some point, if we go back through these at some point, that should be fixed so that the width of the house is the width of the house, not the width of a structure standing in front of the house attached by a breezeway. That we do something about that. I don't know why somebody felt it necessary to limit a structure in this zone to no more than 60% of the width of the lot. Perhaps that's the thing that should be eliminated. But in either case, this should be fixed either one way or the other. So I think the point is, add it to your list of when we go through this. This is something that needs to be changed.
I would suggest, in the spirit of trying to do my best to make our new order of discussion work well, that some of that maybe is better saved for the discussion after the close of the public hearing as opposed to questions of staff. Just a thought.
Perhaps, but I need to find out the basis for which.
Well, the question is
Yes.
fine. I don't object to the questions at all. And it's not so much an objection as just my effort to, as I say, to figure out how to make this order work. Bobby, do you have any questions for staff? David?
I do have a question. I'm very curious, Planning Director Hausch or Planner Bianco, is Dean York Lane is at the far end of if there's the pointy aspect of the lot, is sort of pointing towards Dean York Lane, correct? So as you're attempting to enter this property, you turn right on this easement road, which is already paved. It's currently paved. And then to get into the auto court, are you attempting a 300-degree turn?
Yeah, you sort of, I guess, pass by, the landscaped area and the garage, and then you come in. So, yeah, you're kind of going past it and then turning back in.
Okay.
I don't know if you're having to do it.
So maybe you back in. Can you actually the radius here? Can you actually turn?
I think there's room to turn.
The page A1.1.01, which is on the screen, shows the access location, and it does not. It didn't raise any red flags for Public Works or the fire department with regards to circulation or the ability to get on and off the property. And I think having significant amounts of backup room once you enter onto the auto court area also allows folks to turn around and ensure safe egress and ingress to the
Great, that's where I was heading. I'm trying to get a sense of how large the auto court is, though. It's 40 feet wide, okay. 40 feet deep from behind the garage door is what the applicant has just told me. And then what's the width to encompass the 3 garage doors? Do you know?
Well, what I mean is
You should come up to them. You should.
I believe that width is approximately 40 feet.
Also 40.
I think it's hard to tell on the little drawings, but it's a very large auto court. So for me, it's you come down the private road,
Yeah.
and you turn right, and so you're going into the auto court perpendicular to the little driveway there, which is about 15 feet deep.
Okay.
And then you make a 90-degree turn into the garages,
Okay.
and then there's plenty of room to back up. It's an exceptionally large auto court.
Okay. Okay, so it's 40 foot wide, and how deep is it?
I think I'm guessing 80 feet or
Oh, 80 feet,
like
okay. That is large. 40 by 80. Wow, okay. Thank you.
It's about the size of this room.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's the extent of my
Okay,
questions.
thanks.
Director Hausch, I do have one question. I think in explaining your analysis in consultation with the city attorney of the flag lot question, you made reference to another property. Is that another property nearby?
No, so when this project was previously approved for demolition of the home that was on it, and design review was approved to construct a different home that was never built.
Right.
When that development process went through, a use permit was not required, which would have been required should it have been deemed a flag lot at the time. And further, in looking at the definition of a flag lot, the parcel does not meet that definition in that it does not have frontage on either a private or public road. So this is an access drive per the definition of the zoning code, which is slightly different. I know it's somewhat semantics, but if you look, we have definitions for all these individual circumstances, and in staff's review and analysis of it, it does not meet the definition of a flag lot as identified in the zoning code.
Thank you. I do want to come back to this when we're having our discussion to close the public hearing, because I think there are some important questions about how we fit non-conforming parcels into this set of definitions, but I don't want to take that time now. So if there are no other questions for staff, I will open the public hearing. The public hearing is open. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. We can have our discussion. Anyone want to jump in?
Well, I'll start. I like this project, and I respect the care that the applicant has taken in developing it. I have two things that I would like to discuss, and one is I would like to condition the approval with a building a soundproof structure with 4 walls and a roof over the pool equipment. I'm really sensitive to the possibility that I know sound travels, especially in the still night, and I have a feeling that this won't cause a problem with the applicant, but I would like that to happen. And I also there is a quote from the general plan policies here about generous landscaping, but I believe it says generous landscaping to shade homes and the street, and my feeling is even though the water analysis has taken in consideration the lawn, I'm concerned with the finding compatibility with future construction, both on and off the site, in terms of having a lawn. It just seems that our drought-prone conditions here, even if it's going to be watered by a well, indicate to me that, maybe there should be a moratorium on lawns. I just think if the landscaping could be drought resistant to that extent, I would like to see that. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but I think it's important not to be planting lawns now or in the future with new development because of the water situation. So those are my two concerns. And otherwise, I think this is wonderful, and I'm really happy that the applicants are happy, and I hope they can go ahead with it.
David?
Yeah, I like the project. It's thoughtfully designed and looks nice. As long as the fire department and public works have no issue with the tight turn, given the size of the auto court. That's my sort of health and safety concern. I don't see any reason why this shouldn't be approved, and potentially, John, or with Commissioner Pont's consideration to have a inspection of the driveway. I think that's reasonable on a yearly basis.
Can we do that?
John?
Thank you. I too like the design, and you notice my concerns circulated around a couple of technical issues. And like I said, it was a very clever addition to add the breezeway, which all of a sudden obviated the 60% problem, as you were running closer to 70. But like I said earlier, that needs to be fixed either one way or the other. If it is a single structure, it should be measured as a single structure the entire width, not just the side of the garage. Although, frankly, I don't see why that's in there. The 60% restriction is in there anyway, because setbacks are there for a good reason, and to sort of add additional setback is a little weird. But nonetheless, it's the statute. But I do remain concerned about the flag lot issue. And that's another thing to put on the list. Our definitions have to be changed so if it looks like a flag lot and functions as a flag lot, it gets cleared as a flag lot. And right now, I presume the only thing that we've got at least apparent agreement on the commission on is to add the requirement that this does indeed get inspected annually by the fire marshal to make sure it remains clear and open, because it literally is a health and safety issue.
Can I ask a question of that request? Who would monitor whether that would be done if that were, or is that something that we can do? Because
The fire department.
Okay.
Yeah, the fire marshal takes a look.
We do that for flag lots, do we not? Isn't that a condition of approval?
It's a requirement of all flag lots that the fire marshal inspect them annually to make sure that they're clear, that there's no overgrown or intrusion.
It's a service provided by the
This one is more
city,
than 100
actually.
feet long, so if there's something blocking it, it'll never get back there.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have the code in front of me, but it's always been my understanding that the flag lot ordinance was effectively a set of development standards for creation of a flag lot, and perhaps for development of an existing flag lot as defined. I'm not convinced that section of the code was written to or intended to apply to non-conforming lots that might be a defect in the code in some sense. What I find a bit troubling is that it isn't clear from the materials that were provided in this situation how the driveway standards work in this situation where we don't have a flag lot. The access is dependent on an easement which may or may not be deeded. I think there's a note on the Albion survey that the easement referenced thereon cannot be located as of record. It's fairly clear from the assessor's map how in combination with the survey and site plans, how the access works. And while knowing from rather hard-earned experience that one relies on the assessor's maps at one's peril, I see a couple things, I think, that are relevant to John's questions about history, although they don't unequivocally answer them. There is a reference to record of survey in this area. In fact, on this parcel, I think, or on a neighboring parcel. No, I have to get reoriented. Yes, there's a record of survey reference on this parcel. 42 record of survey. 85, this print is so small I can barely make it out. On looking around, I see other record of survey references. I see the adjoining parcel 23 was created by a lot line adjustment. And I note, John, that parcel 23 is a flag lot as defined by our ordinance, and I suspect that was required in connection with a lot line adjustment.
If I may say something here,
Yeah.
We don't know whether or not this parcel qualifies as a flag lot under our statute.
Well, it's not a flag lot if it wasn't created to meet the flag lot standard. So,
Well, not exactly, because our flag lot standards allow private easements under a weird set of particular circumstances that are not owned by the rest of the lot, then to be considered a flag lot.
yeah, and as I say, I believe that was intended to apply to parcel divisions, lot line adjustments, and other acts of parcel creation that triggered application of those standards. But regardless, there is information on the assessor's map, and what I'm not seeing anywhere in any of these parcels is a reference to a parcel map. So any substandard by size parcels here, presumptively, and I'll repeat my admonition that one relies on the assessor's information at one's peril, but the implication is that any parcel below the current minimum parcel size was created before that standard was adopted by the city, and to the extent there was a division of lands out here, which there must have been at some time, then the parcels were, again, by implication, created before the requirement for a parcel map for small divisions, which I think takes us back to sometime in the 1950s. It's somewhere in there. 54, 55 is the last date you could create a parcel by grant deed without meeting the requirements of the Subdivision Map Act. So it's nothing but a guess, but it does look to me like this parcel and the ones around it have been in existence at least since sometime in the 1950s. Now, having walked through that dissection of the assessor's map, I am troubled by the fact that we can't answer John's questions about the history at this time, and unsure whether that warrants continuance or not. With respect to, and you can chime in at any point, but I thought maybe everyone would be happy if I just finished and turned my mic off. With respect to inspections by the fire marshal or fire department,
I do have a comment on that.
I was just going to observe that since the property owner doesn't do the inspections, we can't meaningfully require that that they be done as a condition of approval, though I know conditions sometimes say things like that. I'm pretty sure the fire marshal can do that anytime they please.
So that is correct. And getting to the flag lot issue, staff didn't find that the project met the definition of a flag lot because it doesn't have frontage on a public or private street. So rather than utilize that definition, we referred to the standards for access drives, which is how staff saw this parcel as being accessed. And there's a significant amount of information regarding that. But one of the requirements, which I think will address the Commission's concerns, is that the last section of this access drive section requires access drives shall be inspected annually by the fire marshal to ensure the landscaping and other obstructions do not hinder emergency vehicle access. So the concerns of the Commission are met through the fact that it is already accessed via an access drive by the definition in the zoning code.
We had recently another project very much analogous to this one. It was a lot behind another lot that was accessed by an easement. And the Commission did add that inspection requirement to that particular project.
But was there already a clause like that in the...
I believe that was for a subdivision. So it was creating a new parcel being accessed off of an existing,
The parcel already existed.
So it's not
This was the parcel on Allen. Yeah.
You're talking about the barn that was being converted into a
Correct.
second unit.
Correct.
And
Correct.
you had identical concerns
Yeah,
in
and
that process as
had an access
in this
easement.
one. Correct.
That probably actually did meet the standards for a flag lot. It probably did exist before 1958, but the Commission didn't accept it as a flag lot, but did add the inspection restriction to it.
But there's already one here.
So this is an analogous to that.
Except there's already one here, so do we really need that if it's already there?
Well, my point may be too philosophical to be useful. I'm just not sure what it means to tell the applicant that we're requiring the city to inspect the driveway when the city can do that any time they please. It puts the applicant on notice, perhaps, but it doesn't seem to me that in terms of our concerns as commissioners, it even really offers us any but the sort of broadest and vaguest assurance that it will be done.
I'm wondering, since the city attorney has already looked into this issue of a flag lot, that the idea of continuing so that we could find out more doesn't seems like it would be a hardship on the applicant, and it doesn't seem like it's already been done. I mean, it seems redundant unless I'm not understanding what you're saying.
It's funny because I wasn't part of it because I recused myself from that decision on Allen Street, but it's funny that we did attach that as a condition. It is, Chairman Hardy brings up incredibly You can't, how can you assign conditions on an applicant that they cannot fulfill? It doesn't seem possible.
Well,
The
this is-
requirements, it lives in the zoning code, so the planning commission can condition the project to meet the zoning code, and that's what such a condition would be. It would almost be a reminder to both the fire marshal and the applicant that this is a requirement, but that condition would not supersede the requirement.
Who would tell the,
I have a thought.
people that would inspect? What's the process? You're saying it'd be a red flag. So what if that were...
So
who would-
this is an interesting situation. We have a 1 day a week volunteer fire marshal as it is. And so I think the point that Commissioner Pont is making is that this is an important function that the city needs to provide, and it's as much a reminder to the city of that function as it is to anyone else.
So you
Is
would
it
be-
possible, Noah, to ask the fire marshal to come speak to us as a scheduled matter at some point about the fire marshal's driveway inspection program?
Absolutely. And I will add that this project has been conditioned with significant fire marshal input regarding how the access is to be maintained and addressed given the bridge. So the fire marshal is very thoughtfully looked at this project and is going to be actively involved in making sure that access is adequate throughout the construction process, and the conditions of approval are written by, so there are some specific conditions written by fire marshal to address that. And the pool equipment is conditioned to be enclosed already.
Thank you.
Well, without meaning any disrespect to the fire marshal who isn't here to defend him or herself, it has generally been my observation that these development-related conditions get a lot of scrutiny at time of construction and before final occupancy is approved, but that requirements of city or other regulator staff to conduct annual inspections tend eventually to disappear in the haze of time. So I think a presentation from the fire marshal would be welcome, given that this is a concern that seems to come up with some regularity at our meetings.
This may not be the time, but I'd like to move that this project does not require a CEQA, and that we should approve it as submitted.
I would like to talk a little bit more before we do that.
Okay.
About the idea of the lawn and setting a precedent that that people who are developing properties are going to be very aware of drought conditions here, and that lawns aren't appropriate, or at least that they would consider that. I don't know how. I just feel really strongly about it. If we could. I think it's. I don't see how we can meet that finding with. I don't see how I can meet that finding with that concern.
Remind me which particular finding that is, please, Bobby.
Is number 6. It's a compatibility with future construction, both on and off the site. I think it's really it would be a positive thing to make that statement here. I don't know if that's appropriate, or what you guys think. I don't know if you agree.
Well, I'm in complete agreement that this is a subject we all ought to be very much concerned about, but I'm not myself comfortable, in effect, amending our landscaping design standards on a situational basis. I think your concern, which I share, calls for bringing those standards back for action, and I don't know if we need council direction for staff to bring that back. I think we might.
If there is a moratorium on lawns, that would absolutely be a council priority to condition. However, the design guidelines will have landscaping features and guidelines in them, and that will be coming before the commission for review and action, and that is absolutely appropriate to direct minimizing water use and reducing the installation of lawns through the guidelines.
Yeah.
And I will say the project is required to meet the state water efficient landscape ordinance requirements.
I'm just wondering is it possible to have it be part of your process to ask the whatever applicant until we do something more formal to consider that. That's all. Just and maybe that's all I would like to do with this applicant is to consider not putting the lawn in. I don't know if that would be.
I think you already have.
Well, okay. So we wouldn't condition anything with that request, but I would like to ask you to consider that thing.
We have a motion. Is there any further discussion?
Second.
Well, since the chairman called for further discussion, I just do have a few points.
Please.
After the
I remain uncomfortable with not having complete information. I also remain uncomfortable with the potential inspection of this. Is that enough for me to vote in the negative? Wait, as Bobby says, and more shall be revealed.
Commissioner Pont, since we're having a discussion, as a practical matter, aside from the inspection, there is nothing else that a flag lot designation would do for this particular application. Is that not correct?
Other than the use permit, I do not believe so, although you'd have to ask the experts on that. I'm just guessing. They would know.
The flag lot use permit has requirements regarding access. In addition, it directs that privacy be maintained. From the staff perspective, the code is written regarding the creation of flag lots. Similar to our small lot standards, we are forced to apply them somewhat backwards because they're written anticipating a new parcel. However, we don't have anything to address development of an existing one. That being said, a single-story home with significant setbacks, not closely surrounded by existing development, typically would not be found to have privacy concerns from neighboring properties.
So I hope that makes it easier for you to decide your vote.
We care about you.
Well, if we have some reason to anticipate the fire marshal coming to talk to us about what actually happens and how the fire marshal keeps track of driveways that require that our code requires the fire marshal to inspect, that does satisfy my concerns on that point.
We need a spleen. We need a woman or man spleen here.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Gamera, would you call the roll, please?
Vice Chair Knudsen,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Pont,
Yes.
Chair Hardy.
Yes. And now we'll go off the agenda just a bit here at the request of Director Hausch.
Thank you. Just we want to take a break before the next public hearing, if the next applicants would give us a moment. And we just wanted to thank Lily Bianco. This is her last Planning Commission meeting. She has put in her resignation with her firm M Group, and so she will no longer be providing consulting services to the city. She is, on the other hand, starting her own business. So look for her to maybe return for some other projects, but maybe be speaking from the podium. But anyway, we just really want to thank you for your 2 years of hard work here in the city. You're an excellent planner, and we will miss you very much.
Thank you for that.
Do you have cards?
Not yet.
Let's see, in 2 weeks on a Tuesday, where will you be? Celebrating.
Moving
I suggest
right
Italy.
along. That gets us to 5.3, which is a request by Lydia Stehling for adoption of a resolution granting design review approval for an addition and remodel at 917 Charter Oak. Mr. Heacock, I believe this one is yours.
That is correct. Thank you, Chair Hardy. So the existing 14,820 square foot parcel is currently developed with an approximately 2,500 square foot, 4-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 2-story single-family residence with a 565 square foot detached accessory dwelling unit and an 847 square foot detached barn. The ADU and barn have been approved for demolition previously. The applicant is now seeking design review approval to remodel the existing home, including the addition of 450 square feet of living space, 117 square feet on the first floor, and 339 square feet on the second floor. 239 square feet of new porch space, 328 square foot second story deck, a 260 square foot carport and mudroom, as well as a new 305 square foot one-car garage. Exterior additions to the home would be finished with siding, trim, and roofing that matches those on the existing home, including horizontal wood siding and composition shingle roofing. The proposed garage would be finished with horizontal wood siding and a corrugated metal roof. The height of the existing home would remain unchanged at approximately 30 feet 9 inches to its highest point, which is a box that pretty much creates the hipped roofing. The addition, I understand there are some concerns about the height of the addition. The addition to the rear of the home would be capped at 30 feet, which would be below that existing box that makes the roof go to its highest peak, which is slightly over 30 feet. The garage would be approximately 15 feet in height, and just a reminder that the ADU is not subject to Planning Commission review. Staff does find that the proposed project is consistent with the general plan policies listed in the staff report. As far as floor area ratio is concerned, the parcel has a maximum FAR of .262, which would allow 3,883 square feet of floor area, excluding any FAR exemptions. The home, as proposed, has a FAR of .26, which is below the maximum allowed on site by approximately 33 square feet. The subject property is listed on the City of St. Helena's Historic Resources Master List, and is also located within the Charter Oak Historic District as described in the 1993 General Plan. As such, the applicant consulted with Mark Hulbert from Preservation Architecture, an architect that meets the Secretary of the Interior's professional qualifications and standards in historic architecture, to evaluate the historic status of the home and the proposed project as it relates to the home. His analysis concludes that the proposed project readily meets the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the rehabilitation of a historic property. The proposed changes to the existing home would not dramatically change the massing or scale of the structure, and the historical integrity of the structure would be preserved. The home meets or exceeds all required setbacks, and there are no properties near the proposed project site that would be in any way negatively affected by the development of the project at this location. For these reasons, staff believes that the project is consistent with the design review criteria as listed in the staff report and the municipal code. I would like to note that we received 4 letters in support of this project after publication of the agenda. It supports the project in general, the applicant's transparency and information provided to neighboring properties, and even commends the construction company for their practices. As far as the addition to the rear goes, staff can add a condition of approval limiting that second story addition to the 30 feet height maximum. We also need to modify the conditions of approval to remove condition 18, as that was inadvertently put in from another project. And for these reasons, staff recommends that the Planning Commission determines the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to sections 15.331, 301, and 303. And accept the required findings and approve a resolution granting design review approval for the remodeling and additions to the home located at 917 Charter Oak. The applicant, their architecture team, and I believe their preservation architect are here. That's all staff has at this time.
Oh, there.
Thank you, Mr. Aycock. Then following our new order of discussion, I'd like to invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to speak to the project.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time on our home this evening. My name is Lydia Stehling. This is my husband, Josh Stehling. We moved to Northern California about 4 years ago from Texas, and we landed in St. Helena about a year ago to never move again, as we keep saying. We have 2 young children, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, who are gainfully employed at St. Helena Montessori, and my husband is gainfully also employed down the trail at Realm Cellars. So when we found out we were moving to St. Helena, we decided we really wanted to look for what would be our sort of dream home and kind of put down roots. My parents are in Ireland, rather far away, and they are planning on semi-retiring out here and being close to I'm the only child and the only grandchildren. You know how the story goes, I imagine. So we fell in love with this property very early on, brushed it off just too much, and, we're a little green, didn't really quite know how much it was to do, but we just fell in love with it, and we all did. And we took it on, and as you may recall, in December, I wasn't able to be here, actually. I was at my mother's 70th birthday party, but Chuck, my architect, and Michelle, who've both been fabulous and wonderful to work with, came down here and spoke to you all about removing the old barn, which was a difficult decision for us, as I understand it was for you all as well. But it is now gone, and the previous ADU, as Aaron explained, is also gone. We were actually hopeful to keep that, but the inspections revealed that it was beyond saving, without proper foundation, or just in an incredibly bad shape, worse shape than it actually looked like. So we've cleaned out the back, and our ADU was approved by the building department. We got approval on that around 4th of July weekend and started construction for the ADU in the back. I bring it up because it's obviously relevant to the FAR conversation. Construction's underway for that, and that is what we are planning to have my parents, when they're here 4 or 5 months of the year, stay in. So that is well underway, and with our gratitude for you all for that consideration. So we then pivoted to the main house, and really what we fell in love with, we wanted to keep. It has never been the intention of ours to change this house radically. It needs to be brought up to contemporary living standards. It's not at all meeting that currently, and we also wanted to tweak a few things here or there, and primarily, actually, I hesitate using the word restore, but bring it back to what it should have been, or what it was before. And if you can probably see a little bit from the photographs, but the decades have kind of taken their toll. Things that were of more historic value have been taken. So we're hopeful that we're actually going to be cleaning it up and making it look a little bit more like one of the grand old Victorians that are on Charter Oak. That's our kind of dream and goal and vision. Keeping the main meat and potatoes, the nuts and bolts of the house as is, was a big focus of ours, and Chuck had brilliant insights on doing that. And we've worked closely with Mark, who is here behind Josh, who is our historical architect, so he consulted with us every step of the way. And Aaron and Noah were also wonderful in giving us their time and guidance as we kind of navigated what was a new world to us, although now feel thoroughly entrenched in after a year of a lot of work, but a labor of love entirely. So we're really, we all are kind of putting blood, sweat, and tears into this. We are more than happy to chat about it or answer any questions, and we're just really glad and grateful for the time. So thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, tell me about the mudroom.
The mudroom. So, as a fairly new mother, I've been quickly learning that I wanted to have some space to protect my home from the children and the dogs and everything like that. So it was, when I had my sort of wish list of things that we would have, it was sort of like that, instead of everyone barging into the house, a place to have all the backpacks and the muddy boots and the raincoats and all that kind of thing. So that was, of all things, one of my top lists. I really wanted to have that. These two are giggling because they have kids around the same age. So that was the impetus on that. But as it turned out, there's actually a very long story which you all would never want to hear the whole thing on, but Mark early on discovered that, even though none of us quite realized at the time, that is the original water tower that is sandwiched up against the side. So an inspection showed there was no foundation there, so we were going to kind of remodel and change it in the back, and then he found out 1910 Sanborn, around about then, 1900s, that showed that it was actually the original water tower. So it was, thankfully, the consulting with him, or we would have found ourselves here before we realized perhaps that we needed to save that. So we kind of literally went back to the drawing board and put our thinking caps on and figured out how we could do what we wanted to do, but with keeping it exactly in place. So that's why that turned into my dream mudroom, and it actually lends itself quite well to that kind of a space. And then probably notice upstairs, the upstairs of the water tower is our master closet.
I think it's, it's the next step after taking your shoes off when you have to enter a house. But, it's an amazingly wonderful idea. I was picturing a spa kind of mud bath. I thought, what? All right. Well, hey, I don't know much.
No, the other kind of mud, the mud coming off your rain boots. Yeah, no. I kind of like that idea better, though.
That's great. Thank you.
Maybe when the kids are in college, we can change it.
I have a question, Chairman Hardy, for the applicant.
Please proceed.
Or perhaps the historical architect. Two things. One is the water tower, you're bringing the height up to the eaves line, right? And I'm wondering if sort of that dissonance with the fact that it's sort of awkward today, it's a little bit lower. Was there any consideration to sort of continuing that sort of awkward height, or perhaps even a slightly higher, to emphasize that unique feature rather than have it so blended into the roof line?
That's a really, I'm happy for Mark to speak to it as well, but it's an interesting point. We'd all felt like we were so surprised that it was a water tower, because traditionally the water tower would have been obviously separate, or at least distinct, or usually really taller, correct? So we were kind of surprised, and then it became a functional issue. Do we want to step down? Do we want to make sure that there's head clearance? All this kind of stuff. But we never entertained the idea of raising it. I don't want to speak for all of us, but I would have no problem making it higher. It's just currently it needs a new foundation. It needs proper support. And so we were thinking that when we add in that, we would raise it so it was level. Do you want to speak, Mark?
Yeah, I think that we did raise it a couple of feet because it is quite the safety issue, too, of walking into that room. 2 really sharp steps. We had to rebuild the whole thing from the ground up anyway, so we thought might as well raise it to a level floor condition, especially considering our 2 small children.
No, I understand that. What I'm curious about is, because it's a unique architectural feature from the outside, not the inside, maybe, and what it's sort of off the roof line, that maybe you actually bring it up so it's slightly high. Just from a historical architect perspective, it sort of set itself apart initially. Is there a way to retain that uniqueness while still meeting modern building codes and the desire to have a proper ceiling height? That's all. I'd be curious.
Hi, Mark Holbert, preservation architect. Yes, we've talked a great deal about this water tank structure, and I guess my advocacy, and it was definitive advocacy, to keep this element and to integrate it. It's kind of an odd thing at the moment. You really at first I thought, oh, there might be a water tank house here, and it really took the Sanborn map to show that, because it doesn't have the height of a water tank. It's got an awkward low thing. So raising it up was a goal, to raise it up. And I mean, I didn't find a purpose to segregate it like you're suggesting. I think really just that it's saved. Right now it's not segregated. It hasn't been segregated since 1910. It was attached as part of the original rear additions when John Money built this house, obviously incrementally, being a builder, and we all know what it's like to be the cobbler's son. And he obviously added on, and at one point very early on integrated this thing, but in a very low stance. So, I mean, I guess we did look at a scheme, Chuck looked at a scheme that kind of made it a more prominent element, and I think I'm the one who nixed that. It just seemed like it wasn't fulfilling what it is, what it really has been over time, and the point is just make sure that it's there. That was kind of, I think, the simple goal that I promoted.
Okay, thank you.
I have just a follow-up question. Then, do the records you have indicate it was never any taller than when you discovered it?
No indication of.
I mean, the height is the purpose of the height is to generate pressure.
Well, perhaps it was never used as that. I mean, perhaps it was never. I mean, I don't know. It was labeled in the original Sanborn water tank house. So when it was independent, but I don't know.
Could the tank itself have been on top of it?
Well, if it had no roof, I mean, we have no evidence of any of that, though. No evidence of it.
You couldn't have supplied water to anything but the ground floor with that.
I mean, it's
odd.
Yeah, it's an odd thing. I mean, and there's one adjacent, isn't in one of the properties adjacent that's slightly taller.
At 931.
Yeah, exactly.
That one I know well.
In the back, yeah. So. It's kind of like, I don't know, there was a curiosity. I mean, it was curiosity that it wasn't obvious until you really thought about it and looked into the records, and then it was like, okay, here's a curious thing. There was a fire in this house, not from what I know of in the back of the house. There was records of a fire in this house early during the Money's residence.
Uh-huh. Still see the burnt in part of the attic.
Yeah, right, some of the framing. I think it was more at the front and related to the fireplace. So, but, again, there's such a dearth of information about what it is, and we have what we have, and
thank you.
That's what we're working with.
Thank you.
So I have a second question. When we approved the ADU, whenever that was, there was a lot of discussion about the lovely barn structure, and I'm very curious with this new garage structure, which is essentially from the street, maintaining the location of that original barn. Can you address, because the barn doesn't exist anymore, how the garage structure either mimics or doesn't the roof line and the width of that former structure?
That's why we're all here.
Charles Covello, the architect. Good evening. David, that is our goal, is to, the owners have actually salvaged the doors from the old barn, and that's why we're using corrugated roofing. And we're going to do our best to, the original barn was taller than the height limit, though, so we have to bring the height limit, or bring the garage in under the height limit of 15 feet. I think it was closer to 17 feet originally. And rather than ask for an exemption for that, we're just going to work within the 15 feet, just for expediency's sake.
Would you prefer the 17 feet? I don't know what a variance would require.
I think they would, yes.
Would they? So when it's a, could I ask a question of staff? Chairman Hardy?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate at this time.
What would be the process to have the height of the garage structure be 17 feet to mimic what was originally on the
So they're correct that the height is maxed at 15 feet, so that would require a variance application, so that's $5,000. However, variances can't be self-created hardships. So you can't come in and say, I want this just because, and therefore I'm applying for a variance. There needs to be something particular to the property or the circumstance that is not unique to that property.
Well, I think what's unique and is that there was great concern about the original barn and its beauty and long-livedliness. Is that a term? I don't know whether there's a way that this application could be modified to include that original height given our codes in this town. And I see that Mr. Hausch is doing this.
The Kashani solution, which is to change the grade in order to alter the calculation. This is never a favorite of staff, but
so there is a provision. There is a provision 17.1.12.080 height limit modifications. The following general provisions shall apply to the modification of the height limitations of this title. The height limitations specified in this title shall not be exceeded by more than 5 feet for the following types of buildings and structures: church spires, belfries, domes and flagpoles, television, radio antenna, excluding satellite. So you could provide direction for staff to try to do some analysis. It doesn't cleanly fit. There is cupolas or other roof structures under the same section. However, it talks about for the housing of elevators, stairways, tanks, ventilating fans, air conditioning, or similar equipment.
There could be equipment placed in this.
There could be, and they may want a ventilation fan in their garage. There is an opening in the front. However, so the commission could direct their tentative support and direct staff to review the code, potentially with the city attorney, to see if that's available. However,
well, could I hear from the historical architect regarding the advantages or disadvantages of maintaining that profile, if he has an opinion?
Well, I hope I'm not advocating. I mean, I'm really not. I haven't been that way all along. But it's sensible, It's a historic resource. It's like, okay. If it relates back to its context, the stronger it does so, this house needs that. I mean, it needs more context. It is so absent of character. It's like one of these like almost falling through the cracks historic houses. Lydia said, the decades it's suffered over the decades. It really has, and that could strengthen its character, which I couldn't possibly stand here and oppose that concept.
So, if this comment should be delayed until our discussion, Chairman Hardy just interrupt me, but it strikes me that this is a 30-foot tall building, and if you bisect it identically at 15 foot, that's not as pleasing as having potentially a 17-foot height to the roof. And given the massing of the main building, I would encourage staff to figure out a way to allow a 2-foot increase in the garage height to mimic the prior barn.
Well, I think to go any further, we really should wait till we're in discussion, although I don't think we're very far from it, because I don't think there's anyone for the public hearing but for the applicant and the applicant's representatives. Are there any other questions for staff?
I have one. I couldn't tell by the drawings, and you mentioned it in your staff report, but the additional roof line is indeed 8 3/8 inches, 8 3/4 inches lower. It is at 30 feet, not at 38 3/4.
You can't tell from the plans.
No, I can't.
No.
That's why I asked the question.
No, so that's why staff is willing to add a condition of approval that any additional roof height toward the rear of the structure will be capped at 30 feet.
Okay. Otherwise, they would need a variance, right?
If it was over 30 feet, absolutely.
Yeah.
If there's no further questions for staff, I'll open the public hearing, which I promise will be brief. The public hearing is now open. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to the commission? Seeing none. The public hearing is closed. So I'll just launch here on your comments, David. I certainly don't have any objection to asking staff to make some inquiry, but this does really, again, sound to me like something that would be best addressed in some section of the code. It sounds to me as though what you're suggesting, and I agree, is that there ought to be some flexibility that enables the city, whether it's staff level or commission level, to approve some variance from the height limits for projects in an historic district, I would say, or designated historic structures or properties with designated historic structures on them that doesn't require an application and approval of a variance itself. That makes some sense to me. I'm not sure that there's a way to do it for this project without an amendment to our standards or zoning somewhere, and but I have no objection to having staff make that. Well, I was just going to ignore that. But
for the benefit of the viewers at home,
is that the bats in the belfry?
Exactly
height
right.
limit
So,
exemption?
The code does allow for slight exemptions to height limits for this sort of, a fan or some sort of a breeze-inducing machine. What's the term that was in the planner house? What was the actual code or planner heatcock? You don't want to stretch the code so it's ridiculous, but in this case, given the historic nature of the barn that was removed at great sadness to all concerned, heck, this is a quick and easy fix.
I wasn't sad.
It's under 17.1.12.080.
Sorry.
It's not clear, and doing analysis in a public hearing setting is never a good thing to do.
Let's take a vote.
However, again, if the commission is supportive, staff would encourage them to incorporate a condition that directs us to work with them to provide code analysis, and if the mechanism is there, the commission would indicate if their support.
Yeah, I feel really strongly about undermining the variance, the intention of the variance, and I can understand everybody. I don't have that sense of appreciation of historical buildings as everyone else does, and I think I'm the one who's the odd one out. But however, I think it's really important not to stretch a variance to accommodate what you want, because then when we really need to use one, it will have been undermined. So that being said, I also would not like to see anything go ahead without, and I don't expect any difference, but the neighbors sent their letters of approval with the height as it was. They may feel massing or a loss of privacy with something high. I don't know. I'm just saying I think the neighbor support is wonderful and reflects the thoughtfulness and the character of all of the people who are involved in this. And I commend you all for that. But I do think that there should be another. They should be informed. And I don't know how you do it, but that this change was there, because that can be significant. A height change can feel significant to neighbors. So I want to support having that be part of the process if we go ahead with that. Otherwise, I don't really care one way or the other.
Commissioner Pond.
Yes, well, I'd like to start off by complimenting the applicant for their historical research on this particular parcel. It must have been a long, drawn-out process to get to where you are today. But to start off with, I don't think we can bend 17112-080A to fit to raising a roof line. But if you want to include it as part of the action, I'm fine with that. I just don't see any way to stretch it. It sounds like we've got another thing that may be subject to our design standard changes again, and have that bleed over to the zoning code in this case. But I would be in favor of it only in a real narrow band, historical plots in which they were duplicating the massing of existing or previously existing historical structure kind of thing. That's kind of like as far as I'd be willing to take this one. I, too, like Commissioner Knudsen, would love to see the water tower lowered. To me, part of the charm of one of these buildings is indeed the varying roof heights. The difference in before and after in your drawings, to my eye at least, is large versus having the lower water tower. The other thing I note is this is right at our max limit as far as the FAR goes. And that's code, that's fine. But to ride that hobby horse straight into the ground, we shouldn't be giving an FAR exemption for something we mandate, i.e. the garage. I'm sorry. We've got to do something about that. At any rate, I think it's a fine project. I would like to see the water tower lowered. I don't care if the roof goes higher, but I don't think we can do that the way it's structured right now. So unless the applicant cares to apply for a variance, that would be quicker than us changing the code, I'm afraid. And I'd let that one go.
More expensive.
$5,000. It's something. Commissioner Pont, just to correct, I thought the water tower actually could be raised in height, meaning that you disrupt the roof line and add prominence to an architectural moment, and it still fits within the 30 because it's a smaller pitch roof, so there's still space.
I think that's my point. You know, that the varying heights of a roof line
are lovely
in a structure of this age actually attracts the eye.
Yeah,
and the variances make it better looking, not worse. A consistent line is more of a modern line.
I have a particular interest in the project simply because longer ago than I care to think, I lived next door at 931 and rented that house from the owners of 931 and 917, and this was before both those parcels were split. So those were two very large lots open to the vineyard at the rear. I recall at one point, really as a sort of proof of concept enterprise, driving to the common drive between 931 and 917 as it existed at that time from Dowdell straight through the vineyard. But I don't think I would try that today. 917 is old and interesting, and it's hard for me to tell, how many iterations of addition were there over time. One can tell that that's not the original structure, and certainly from inside and to some extent from outside, one sees evidence of some, I guess, in a charitable light, I would call them frugal remodels, without any evident concern for the historic nature of the home. But, you know, that sets the stage for what I believe, in terms of those things that are properly our concern, which are the exterior design. There's an opportunity here that I believe the applicant is thoughtfully pursuing to improve the appearance of the structure in relation to its historic status. The water tower is, to me, a kind of confusing element because it's really hard to tell how it worked in the beginning. And I've been interested in tank houses for a long time. They have this very short window of opportunity between the availability of electricity to pump the water up and the extension of water mains to make the tank house unnecessary. So they're very distinctive of a particular period, and I for one, love them. And having lived at 931, I know that's another sort of strangely short one. Idea always having been to get the water high enough that you had nice pressure with gravity flow, and it takes a little bit of height to do that. Maybe, I don't know, 15 feet does it pretty well if that's the base of the tank, but not any less than that. But I have no quarrels at all with the approach that's been taken. It's a big improvement, and I don't think we can require any more than that, and I'm not thinking we should ask any more than that. Honestly, this is a very nice project, and I support it, and be happy to hear someone make a motion.
I just want to say one more thing, because apropos of Commissioner Pont's remark, you guys get the prize for getting closest to the FAR. It's .002. So I just wanted to congratulate you.
I think it's worth noting that the change in square footage is almost entirely in the ADU. It doesn't have much to do at all with the project that's before us now. All of that square footage ends up being counted.
That's important.
But that really is where the big change was.
All but about 400 square feet. At any rate, I'd like to move the project as presented, with the addition that staff look into the possibility of increasing the height of the garage by 2 foot, which is kind of doubtful the way the code reads, but give it a shot anyway.
Can we also condition it that if you do, that the neighbors be notified of that change?
Is that a question for staff?
Well, I would like to do that. I can ask you or you. I don't know.
I would accept that as an amendment.
I don't see how that works.
Okay.
If we're voting on an approval subject to a condition that essentially gives discretion to staff with respect to that detail, which means that it doesn't come back to us, what does it mean then to give notice? To give the neighbors an opportunity to appeal the building permit?
No, to speak out, because I am very appreciative and give a lot of credence to the letters of support that we got. If I had gotten 6 letters against it, I would give those a lot of respect, and I would consider them. So I think the neighbors and the public has a right to respond to a change in
So
something that might impact them.
You'd like to create the opportunity for them to complain when the complaint is of no use? Because
Well,
it's too late?
If
Well,
I
if
can
that
say
were
something here, I
complete-
wouldn't say the complaints of no use. I mean, clearly the applicants have been responsive to the requests of the neighbors. If their neighbors come unglued over the 2 feet, it becomes an option on their part whether or not to add the 2 feet or not. I mean, they've got a design at 15. If staff says it's possible,
Agreed.
Yeah.
There's some utility to it.
I really think there is. So I would accept Bobby's friendly amendment. So I think there's a whole motion on the table now awaiting a second, if I'm
Second.
correct. No longer awaiting.
Mr. Knudsen, do you have anything to add?
No, I like it.
I'd just like to add that the conditions of approval will also be modified to remove condition 18 and to add a condition of approval limiting the addition to the rear to 30 feet in height.
I think you mentioned it earlier, so I just sort of
Okay.
accepted them as,
Just making sure.
okay, cool.
Good job.
Do you want to modify your motion to include that specifically?
I already had sort of by reference, but let's do it by formal reference, including staff's 2 changes that they requested.
Second.
Ms. Gamero?
Okay. Commissioner Pont,
With all the moving parts and pieces, yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knudsen,
Yes.
and Chair Hardy.
Yes.
Staff has a brief department report.
Very good. Please proceed.
Just want to thank everyone, commissioners and public, who came out to the design guidelines workshops we held. We got a lot of positive feedback, and I think as of today, we have over 115 survey responses, so we really appreciate that. Want to let everyone know today is the last day to conduct or to take that survey. If you haven't taken it yet, the due date was actually yesterday, but we left it on in order to advertise the last-minute opportunity tonight. So if anyone's watching at home or in the audience and haven't taken the chance to take that survey, or any of our commissioners haven't taken the chance, please do so. It will be removed from the website tomorrow. And upon that, we will begin to consolidate responses, finalize the draft document, and look to schedule a public workshop with the Planning Commission on the review of that document. So just to let you know, it'll probably be a couple months out, given Ms. Bianco's departure and the need to finalize the draft. In addition, we are expecting to publish the general plan and general plan EIR around the 1st of October. So just, again, letting the commission and public know that that is coming. And we do anticipate providing a 60-day public review and comment period of both of those documents, given that it will be a significant amount of information, and we want to just ensure that the public and the commission is comfortable when the documents are brought forward for action. So just letting people know to be ready, carve out some time to review them if they're so interested. And that concludes the department report.
Thank you, Director Hausch. With that, I believe this meeting can be adjourned.